Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Forever Young Women. So happy to have you guys here and to talk about the BS about dementia for women 50, 60, 70. If those of you who are concerned about aging healthy and well and learning the truth about what really works for us, stay tuned, my friends, because this episode, I am going into it. Why? I'll tell you why. Because I've heard two things this week that just, and I'm like calling BS on it. Not that dementia doesn't exist, it absolutely does. It's that two things are happening. In the wellness world, I'm hearing a lot of the longevity health experts, both from men and women, saying the same thing over and over and over. And there is some truth to that. It's not all BS. They're saying, unless you do strength training on the regular and interval training on the regular. They're saying, like, I don't know, two, three times a week, 10 minutes at a time. And like, it's not an exorbitant amount, but they're saying from the studies and the research that they're finding is that it actually helps to get oxygen into the brain and helps prevent and even reverse dementia symptoms. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Yeah, hey, I like that. So I'm trying to incorporate more strength and interval training on the regular. But now they're taking a step beyond that, saying if you don't do strength and interval training, you're guaranteed dementia. And that, my friends, I call BS on. don't don't tell us. And I'll tell you what why. Because I go back, my mother's 91, and I go back to her little community. They don't do strength and interval training. Oh, they're lucky they get up to move and do their little walks and. And a lot of people will say, well, people in their 80s and 90s, they had a better quality of life, they had better food, they had, less stress, they didn't have all this. Not true. They had World War II. They had many of them had World War One, but World War II for sure, and depression, where they had to eat potatoes and peanut butter sandwiches for weeks. Like, it was not a good situation. They had lots and lots of stress, really poor food choices. Every generation has their issues, and they're not having that. My mother's circle, for example, she's in this assisted living community in North Jersey. Yay, Jersey girls. And she doesn't have, I mean, she's just now maybe getting a touch of dementia, and all her friends the same. I mean, she's got a huge circle of friends. It's pretty cool, actually. So I don't think that, if you don't do something, you're definitely going to get dementia or Alzheimer's. I just, when something isn't, there is no absolutes. I think I really side with Ellen Langer. Dr. Langer is a Harvard professor. I've interviewed her. I've read her books, The Mindful Body, and she's written actually many books. And she has said over and over and over, nothing is absolute. Like, 1 + 1 is not an absolute. And I'm like, what? What do you mean 1 + 1? Because she said, we're all taught 1 + 1 is 2. But if you take one pile of clothes from the laundry and take another pile of clothes from the laundry and put it in one big pile, you have one. And that kind of blew my mind, because I've always said that. It's like, but I didn't think of it in those terms. And so understand that when you start seeing a trend, it's like everybody needs to do strength training, that's going to be worried about dementia and Alzheimer's. And if you don't do it, you're definitely going to have it. That's BS. And the other thing that I really can't stand is what I'm seeing in the conventional world, is they're saying that, oh, well, women are living much longer. It's like only 5 years more than the boys. So, it's not like leaps and bounds, but let's say average is about 5 years longer than men. And they're saying, oh, and so that's the cause of dementia. I'm like, that's just plain BS. Just because we're living longer, we're expected to have dementia. Oh, hell to the no. No. I just do not buy that. Just because you live longer, you're getting dementia? What? I keep going back to my mother's circle. Even just 50 people in her circle. And the reason I know there's actually more than that, but my parents were immigrants from Hungary, and we had a big celebration a number of years ago that my mother had been here in the United States for 50 years. She came over during the Soviet Union's Iron Curtains went down in 1956, and she and my father came over. And they weren't they saw horrific things at that time, and so they came over and to America, and they have been here. My father has since passed, but my mother is still here. And during that celebration, her friends put together for her as a surprise. There were at least 100 people in the room, like people that she's known the whole time she's been here. And I'm like, I did not know my mother was that popular. It's kind of nice to see that, right? And everybody was a little stiff, obviously. Everybody's in their at that time they're in their 80s, and everybody's a little stiff and all that. But I didn't even come across anybody who's complaining that dementia and Alzheimer's was in that circle. So, that's just 100 people, let's say. Right. So just say a broad sweep. Oh, everybody's gonna have so anyway. Okay, so let's get into first off, let's get into some differences here because I'm seeing a lot of confusion of people saying, "Oh my God, I have brain fog. That means I'm going to get dementia, and that means I'm going to get Alzheimer's." So I always like to lay the groundwork first, and then give you guys solutions and what can be done from my perspective as a naturopath of 30 years, now 67. And yes, I'm concerned about dementia. I'm not concerned about brain fog at all, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. But the issue of being concerned about dementia and Alzheimer's is not even on my radar, but I have the knowledge that I want to share with you guys why, and hopefully that'll help you. So, first thing is that brain fog is typically happening with women for, I believe, three reasons. One is the incredible amount of stress that many women have had over the years, everything from working and taking care of children and you know being in relationships that are not always healthy, all these issues mentally, emotionally, physically have worn women down, and that amount of stress just and the reason I know that is because when I was in my 30s and 40s, had been married for 16 years, horrible marriage, horrible divorce, and then I went back to school, was single mother, had a clinic in Green Bay, Wisconsin, all these different things. The stress levels, I mean, I was working 80 hours or more per week. And that was when I was my sickest. I was like my absolute sickest. And I got in a very serious car accident. I don't know if I share this, but I got in a very serious car accident, almost died. Some young kid was high on drugs, whatever, and ran a red light, and I ended up getting T-boned. And but my head kind of did this flopsy doodle thing, and yeah, it was a big mess. And that was when I had I had a bad concussion and I had amnesia, and that was my first experience in my late 30s of losing the ability to remember. I had a class to take my daughter to for acting, little drama, community drama thing. I couldn't remember how to get there. Like I could not remember how to. And this was before, you know, the internet with Google Maps. So, and my daughter didn't know how to get there. Like it was a very awful feeling, right? So, but it was temporary, and I knew it was temporary. And eventually, my amnesia healed, the concussion healed, and everything is fine. So that's how I want you to remember brain fog. Brain fog usually is caused by high levels of stress or something that has been happening to you in a long term, meaning hormones. Hello, hormones, menopause, perimenopause. Those are usually also because your hormones are adjusting to aging. So usually your thyroid and adrenals are the two hormone producing glands that get hit first. Yeah. And so always make sure you check your thyroid, make sure you do your free T3, T4s, make sure your levels are good, and make sure you know what your options are for hormone replacement therapy if you need to. But that usually also causes brain fog. It's very, very common at that time. And then hormone stress. Oh, and then when you're not sleeping well. So if you're not sleeping well, then nothing is working. Not your mood, not your weight, not your hormones. Nothing is firing up. And all the amount of coffee in the morning does not help. So understand that you're between not sleeping and then you wake up feeling sluggish and then your brain just feels like it's in a fog all the time. And between the stress and the hormones, it just all compounds. But again, it could you could take care of it and reverse it. And I'll show you some ways to do that. So one of the things I did when I heard, because I do research literally every single day now on longevity specifically for women. And when I hear now there's this trend going on, so be aware, just because we're aging and living longer does not mean as women that we're going to get dementia, but this is what they're pushing on us in media, right? So I looked into, well, what countries are having the most dementia? I'm thinking the US, right? And it wasn't. It wasn't. The top countries were it was Finland, Denmark, and the United States, and then a whole bunch of other Scandinavian countries. And then I went to AI, and they gave me whole, you know, they had Finland, Denmark, the US, but they had other like this is why you have to pay attention. Just because AI says it, just because Google says it, you kind of have to use your common sense and it's like, okay, what is the pattern here? So I started connecting the dots and being in Wisconsin with my first clinic for 20 years. I connected the dots real fast. So let's get into the 5 ways that I have seen that first off will make sure that brain fog is not an issue, but also to understand dementia and Alzheimer's. Okay, so that you don't have to worry about it. You could start looking at what are you doing. So the first top three, what did I say, is getting better sleep, making sure your stress levels are down, and making sure what was the other one I said? Oh, hormone. Yeah, your hormones are balanced, right? Right. But that's for brain fog. So this is not about brain fog. I really want to dive into dementia. So when I saw those countries and living in Wisconsin for 20 years, here's the pattern that I saw that I'm connecting the dots. And put below if you're like, hey, I don't agree with that, or I agree with that. This is where I live. Yeah, yeah. Being in the Midwest, the winters are long and it's very dark. And I struggled a lot because I love my sunshine. I love my warm weather. And that's why here in Florida, or even if I travel, it's always where somewhere warm and lots of sunshine, or I try to. And what I've seen consistently is that when there is a lot of darkness, dark days, rainy days, like the UK, like Finland, Denmark, the Scandinavian countries where they have very long winters, Canada, all these countries that have that, then I noticed that there's something called seasonal disorder syndrome, right? Seasonal. It's a it's really what's happening is you're not getting enough of the sunlight on your skin, in your eyes, that helps to keep your circadian rhythm going. That's the best way I could explain it. I'm trying to think of a really simple way to explain it. So seasonal disorder syndrome is when you're just not getting enough sunlight and your mood starts going down. Your hormones are not happy. Nothing is happy. Your brain starts to shut down a little bit. And it's just like, listen, I don't have my tools that I need, and it starts to get wonky, right? And so I notice this constantly because the amount of depression in Wisconsin that I saw, I mean, I had many, many clients coming in being on heavy, heavy medication for depression. And back then it was lithium, but there was many. And that's not my area of expertise. So I always had to, refer them out. But they would come in desperate. And I wish I knew then what I know now, which is, more about the red light. So what really helps for that, when you're in a climate, when you're in a weather, you have got to do something about it. So back then, seasonal disorder syndrome, we did the white LED lights, right? But they were called OT lights, I believe. And it had the rays of the sun, but the red light is so much better now. The red light has, all the rays of the light and, all those different things that our body needs. And what's very cool about it is you could have a panel that you could put on your desk and have it going on, or put on the mask, which, you have to go sit for 30 minutes somewhere and allow that to go. But really, the panel and having that, they also have hats where you could put it on and have it for your brain. That's really nice too, because then it's going right on your head and getting into the brain cells, right? But you got to have something like that. I mean, I've not seen anything else work as effectively as that. So when I was in Wisconsin and then I moved over to California, I didn't see that much. I saw more anxiety issues from people. That was a whole another thing, but I did not see the depression so much. And so over the years, I learned about the red light. And so when I met clients who had that issue wherever they lived, they were in cold weather, dark weather, then I gave them the red light therapy, or back then they were big panels, like for the whole body. And they, it was kind of like the computers back in the day, when they were massive and it took up a whole room. Now look, basically our phone is like little mini computers, right? So understand, it's very, very important to have that red light on the daily during the winter time. So that's number one. Number two is something I've not spoken about in a long, long time. I did on my TikTok, and that went viral because there's just very few people talking about it. And that is getting your amalgam fillings out. So those are your silver fillings. Most of us had them as kids. I had one crack back when I was a naturopath in Wisconsin and had to go get that taken care of. And then I got again, I go down that rabbit hole and I learn all the things that happen with silver fillings, amalgam filling, and it's typical. It's very typical that they do crack because after 20, 30 years, things happen to our teeth. So here's what I will tell you. When I had my clinic in California, and people would come in and they had brain fog all the way to most of my clients had cancer. I started looking at, well, what's happening in your teeth if you've had root canals, amalgam fillings, all these different things. And because I was very close to the border with Mexican doctors, I went and talked to them and learned how incredibly experienced they are with this stuff. So I started taking my clients down because the Tijuana border was like 20 minutes away. So we went across and I took them. Like I took them and it was like a whole day's excursion. They got their amalgams removed, they got the root canals cleaned up. Every single one of my clients who came out of there, they said, I cannot believe how clear the world is. Like they said, it was like not only the fog lifted, but they just felt so much sharper, right? And then of course we did the detox and we did there was many layers to it. And that opened my eyes as like, who's talking about this? Right? They're saying, do some strength training and exercise. Now listen, there's a few pieces missing, chickadees. There's a few pieces you're missing. And so be aware that what's happening in your teeth. Well, think about it. What's happening in your teeth, it goes up into your brain, right? It goes down into your lymphatics, goes down into your breast cancer. Like when I saw breast cancer clients, I would ask them, have you had root canals in certain teeth? There's a whole tooth chart thing. Anyway, and typically there was a connection. So do something about that. Holistic dentists here in this country are outrageously expensive. I don't recommend not a one. I really don't. And I have many friends who are, but I don't. I say go to Mexico. Way, way better. So I do encourage you guys to understand this part of it, right? What's happening in your teeth to really avoid dementia. So I eventually went and got my amalgams removed. I had like a whole bunch, and same thing. I felt like the fog lifted. I didn't think I had issues, right? But I now know because my teeth are taken care of, I'm not going to have to worry about dementia and Alzheimer's. I really don't. I think this is going to be a big deal. So for me, that's one thing, right? And then the other thing is that when you are trying to get rid of the poisons, you got to, this is a very simple thing. I tell everybody, you got to sweat on the daily. 30 minutes of sweating makes a massive difference in getting rid of those toxins. Because again, when you have issues with the stress, the hormones, all of those toxins that are hormone disruptors are causing issues in our body. And yes, I always encourage, deep detoxes. I have a detox master class, but that won't be up again until the fall. But it's very important to sweat on the daily, like really feel your sweat. And if you don't sweat, which I didn't in the beginning, it made a difference in how I felt, my energy levels, everything was just plugged up. And you need to move your skin. Your skin is the largest detoxification organ, and it gets rid of those toxins and it helps and the more your skin can breathe, the more oxygen you're able to absorb, get into your brain. Everything is all about getting oxygen in your brain, your heart, your cardiovascular system, right? So, again, even if you're doing strength training, I'm really going to harp on this now because it's got me a little bit like, I don't like misinformation. And so when they're saying, "Oh, just do strength training and interval training," well, yeah, but if you don't sweat, how is your skin breathing? Hello, like you got to get your skin breathing. Like I'm big on that. And when you start noticing the sweat, so how do you start sweating? You could start doing some dry skin brushing. You could do salt scrubs. I could get into that if you guys want to. But it is very important that you get everything moving so that the skin is breathing. I know that every day that I go out and walk or bike ride or whatever, I'm feeling like my armpits. Am I feeling it here? Now I walk like a minute, I'm already sweating. It's super easy. But back in my 20s and 30s, I never used to sweat. And I used to put on the lotion because my skin was always dry in the winter. And if you guys are worried about that, I do highly recommend dry skin brushing for that as well. Your skin won't be as dry, but if it still does, use coconut oil or olive oil. Super simple, super easy. Just put it on a little bit. You don't need much and you're good to go. So sweating. The other one, as far as supplement goes, many of you know. If you don't, I am not big on pushing supplements. But if you're concerned with dementia or Alzheimer's coming down the pipe because you're starting to feel a little bit wonky and you're concerned about it, then I highly recommend eating foods that are high in fat and then be able to digest it because that is an important part of your nutrients that you need at each and every meal. And I'm talking, of course, about unprocessed fats, right? Your olive oil, your coconut oil, avocados, olives, all that stuff. Simple fats, nothing crazy, nothing fried ever. Like, yeah, you could just wave to the restaurant as you drive by. Yeah, see ya. Thank you. It was good when I had you back in the day. I'm not going to have you anymore. You can't. You literally can't. Like that kind of fat will just absolutely cause a lot of problems in you, and you just don't want to even look at it. So the issue though, again, I always remind you guys, is that you need the fats, but you need to be able to break down the fat so it goes to where it needs to go in your body, which means simply that you break it down with enzymes like lipase enzyme. Don't ask me brands. It's on the internet. Enzymes are just the most underutilized supplement that I've ever seen in my life. And I'm an enzyme therapist and I've studied it for 20 years and it just kind of blows my mind. Everybody's taking all these supplements. I'm like, listen, if you just get half the nutrients from your food and you digest it, your body will be happy and take care of you. So use lipase enzyme before meals, or if you don't want to spend the money on supplements, take water, add a cup of water and a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar 30 minutes before your meal and drink that down, or 30 minutes after your meal to help you digest your fat. So omega-3, 6, 9, I've talked about this a few times now when I talk about brain health. It's super important, and you could get it through your foods. You could get it through your salmon and your different types of fish. I'm not a big salmon eater because I've seen salmon farms. I love salmon, but I've seen them. I see how they're raised. It's like they're all packed in. They can't even hardly wiggle. And I remember asking the fish farmers. I'm like, how do they move and stuff? Well, they're fish. They get around. I'm like, w- this just doesn't seem healthy. They just packed in. And they said, well, but we feed them really good, wholesome food and, all this stuff. And I'm like, well, I'm really happy to hear that. But come to find out that they were getting cancer in these fish tanks. I mean, we're talking big fish, fish tanks that are like half the size of football field. Like they're huge, but they're getting cancer. And I said, "What do you do when a fish gets cancer?" "Oh, we just cut it out and then just put it in the packaging." And I'm like, "You what?" Yeah, I could tell you stories. I do my homework. Like if I'm really invested in something, like I go to those places, I ask for the tour, I talk to the scientists, I talk to like I go deep into it so you don't have to. And plus, it's harder for you, I know. So I go and find out because I want the truth and I want you to know the truth. That's the bottom line. And so I just quit eating salmon. I just don't trust the whole industry anymore. So what's better? Sardines, mackerel, that kind of stuff. Um, yeah, oh, but sardines are in tin cans. I know. Like you can't win for losing, right? But I love sardines. So, I try to eat them once a week. So sardines or mackerel, I have them. Uh, you have to balance it. You're never going to have a pure product of anything. Even if it says organic, the cloud comes along that, is raining and then the chemicals that were in one field, it goes up into the cloud. Well, then that cloud moves over and goes down on the organic. The rain comes down on and it's full of chemicals. So you can't win. Yeah, you do the best you can. That's okay. What I do want you to understand, though, is if you sweat daily, that helps to get rid of a lot of the toxins. It really does. But then making sure that you're digesting your fats so that those little fat particles are going to where it needs to go, your brain, and to feed your cardiovascular system, you actually do need fats. That's good. And you just use the lipase to help you with that. So get your omega-3, 6, 9s in, raw nuts, that kind of thing. But just be careful because as the older you get, the harder it is to digest it. It's just much, much harder to break it down, especially at me in my 60s. I'm finding that it's been really hard to digest. So I just have learned to just take little handfuls of raw nuts and just go easy on it and not have so much. But at every meal, it is important to have it. Okay, so I think that's the all the parts that we're going to cover. And if you guys have questions about, well, what about, you know, other things that we could do for dementia? I'm just covering, the overview. I'm going to go deeper into this in my Forever Young Women's Club. That'll be starting March 15th, and hopefully we'll get into a lot more in depth with that, especially if you're concerned about it. Just understand this. I'm just going to leave you with this note. Understand this, that n- it's about 95% of these diseases like Alzheimer's is not genetic. It's not, and you say, well, my mother had it, my father had it, everybody in my family had it. Yeah, well, I could say the same thing. My aunt had stomach cancer, and then my other aunt had stomach cancer. My cousin had stomach cancer. I'm not going to get stomach cancer. No, because I've chosen a different lifestyle. I've chosen different things to do to make sure I don't have stomach cancer. And I know now that the numbers are right. That's 95% is not genetic. So what does that mean? That means that it's only 5% that you might inherit something like Alzheimer's, but that means that 95% of what we do in our lifestyle, like the tips I'm giving you, are the most important, right? It's those daily habits you do throughout the day, right? So am I saying that strength training and interval training is no, I of course go do it. I'm still going to do it. I'm just not going to be in this fear mongering that, oh, if I don't do it, I'm going to get dementia. I'm not going to buy that. But I am going to do all these other things, right? Sweating. I've already taken care of my teeth. I'm doing the strength training throughout the day. I don't go to the gym. I just do things. I'm little bits all day long is the point to keep the circulation, the blood flow, the oxygen going to our brain. So I hope that gave you guys some encouragement. As always, I'd love to hear your comments and questions about it. And let me know what you think. Are you concerned about dementia? What are you doing about it? Share, share, share. I'm really loving the community. You guys are asking some really cool questions already. Love to hear that. And let's do this together. right? Ultimately, that's what it's all about. Let's do this together and share what is working for you and see if that resonates and see if that's something somebody else wants to incorporate, right? Okay. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. We'll see you on the next episode.